My name is Jesus Garcia. I am a solutions architect here with Abnormal AI, and I'd like to thank everybody here for joining us for our third Threat Stream webinar series. As you can see, today is a recorded session. Mike Morton is across the pond from us over here in the United States, but was kind enough to do a recorded session. Today, we are going to be talking about cryptocurrency fraud. So if there are any questions during this session, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A, and I'll be sure to answer them at the end of this recording that Mike Morton provided us. And with that, I guess we'll get this started.
Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to this month's Abnormal Threat Stream. This is our monthly series where we take a closer look at the latest real-world attacks and uncover how threat actors continue to evolve faster than traditional defenders. My name is Mike Morton. I'm a Solutions Engineering Manager here at Abnormal AI, and today we're going to dive into one of the most, I feel, a fast-moving and frankly most profitable forms of cybercrime right now, cryptocurrency fraud. Unfortunately, I am unable to make the session live. However, I do have some amazing colleagues on the line who will be on the webinar to cover the live Q&A. So feel free to use the Q&A feature as we move through the content for today. The session is called Fast Money, Faster Scams, and that title really captures the pace of what we're seeing. You know, attackers are using crypto as both a target and a tool, and the tactics they are using to steal from individuals, whether it's developers or enterprises, are increasingly sophisticated. But before we dive in, let me take a quick moment to explain what the Threat Stream series is kind of all about. The Threat Stream is designed for security practitioners who really want to stay a step ahead of emerging threats. Each month, one of our experts dissects a real-world attack intercepted by our platform, showing how these campaigns work, where legacy defenses fail, but how behavioral AI can spot them subtle anomalies that signal an attack is being taken place before damage is actually done. So if you're looking to close detection gaps or reduce analyst workload, or simply stay ahead of attacker trends, you're absolutely in the right place. So let's talk about what we will cover today. First, we'll look at the broader cryptocurrency threat landscape and why attackers are so focused on this space and how their methods are actually evolving. Next, we'll unpack two real-world case studies, one involving a fake NPM two-factor authentication reset that really compromised popular software packages that everyone knows, and another where attackers impersonated Ledger. This is a well-known hardware wallet company to steal recovery phrases. And after that, I'll walk you through a very quick live demo of how Abnormal detects and stops these kinds of impersonation and credential theft attacks in real time. And then finally, I will, because I'm recording, plug in the upcoming Threat Stream sessions, and then we'll move to a live Q&A with some of my colleagues. So let's jump into it. But before we get into the real world examples, let's take a step back and talk about, the broader cryptocurrency threat, how attackers are operating, what does the actual impact look like, and what kinds of defenses actually make a difference. Cryptocurrency has fundamentally changed the way attackers think about profit. When you think about it, it's fast, it's anonymous, and it is absolutely irreversible. And that's the perfect setup for quick monetization. But the attacks we're now seeing aren't limited to stealing tokens from a wallet. They extend across developer ecosystems, vendors, and financial supply chains, but all follow the same pattern of exploiting trust to get that fast money. So let's break down kind of what's actually happening here. So the technique most often starts with impersonation. Attackers posed as trusted platforms, things like NPM, Ledger, or Microsoft, and they use legitimate looking emails to lure people into taking some form of action, whether that's resetting your two-factor authentication, whether it's verifying your wallet, or it could be just updating your credentials or even just reviewing some kind of simple payment. And when you look at these at a glance, the messages look good. They carry the correct branding, they use secure domains, and they even use familiar formatting. But when you look at it behaviorally, something's always slightly off. We see that same playbook applied, whether it's a fake NPM notification or an invoice from a compromised vendor account. And once attackers gain access, they move fast. They inject malicious code into software packages, redirect crypto or wire payments, or even steal credentials for future use. And they rarely need a technical exploit these days. The entry point almost always is email, and they use the exploitation of human trust. The impact can be immediate and far-reaching. In the crypto world, it means things like drained wallets and compromised recovery keys. In the kind of software supply chain, it means poison packages that spread malware to thousands of downstream users. And in the enterprise space, it means invoice fraud and vendor payment diversion. And whether it's digital currency or corporate cash, the end goal is the same: to move that money before anyone actually notices. And because these campaigns blend seamlessly into normal communication, traditional security tools, things that rely on signatures, rely on threat intelligence to look at links, or even static policy checks, they often see nothing's wrong. When you think about sender authentication, they pass SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. And a lot of the times with cryptocurrency and invoice fraud, there's no obvious malicious payload. And that's where defenses have to evolve. The only way to spot these types of attacks is to look for behavioral deviations. And that's subtle shifts in, the how, when, and from where people actually communicate. Maybe a trusted sender is emailing from a new region, or the brand that they're using is slightly off pattern language, or a vendor, that wants to change banking details. They are all signals that expose something that looks ordinary, but actually isn't. And that's what connects directly to the cases or the case studies that we're going to talk about. First, we'll look at a fake NPM two-factor authentication reset that led to a supply chain compromise with a crypto draining payload. Then we'll move on to a Ledger impersonation campaign that tricked users into surrendering their recovery phrases for their wallets. And then finally, we'll see how the same fast money mindset plays out in an enterprise setting with a compromised vendor rerouting legitimate invoice payments. But what you'll see across all of them is the technique, the impact, and the defense relatively stays the same. Attackers are exploiting trust to move that money quickly, and defenders are relying on behavioral context to actually stop them. So let's jump into the first case study, which shows how a single convincing email can spark a large-scale compromise, and one that ultimately targeted cryptocurrency through the software supply chain. So in this campaign, attackers impersonated NPM support. They sent emails that warned developers that their two-factor authentication had expired and needed to be actually reset to stay compliant with an upcoming policy. On the face of it, the email looked completely legitimate. It had professional branding, it had the proper layout, it had the links, everything a real NPM notification would have. Developers who clicked on the links were taken to a spoofed NPM login page, which even included a capture challenge to make it feel authentic. Now, captures to me do two things. First, it kind of reassures the victim. Developers and others expect some kind of security check when performing some kind of account action. But second, and more importantly, it prevented security tools and URL crawlers from analyzing the site. And that meant most email security scanners couldn't actually evaluate the destination and actually saw nothing that was suspicious. And then once a maintainer entered their credentials and a one-time code, the attackers harvested them in real time and then used them to log into legitimate NPM accounts. And with that access, they published malicious versions of highly popular packages, things like Debug, Chalk, and others that you would recognize. But they targeted packages that were downloaded billions of times every week for maximum impact. And inside those updates, they planted a JavaScript-based crypto drainer. The malicious code quietly hooked browser and Node.js functions. I think there was fetch and XML HTTP request, and they used them to monitor for Web3 and wallet transactions. And when it spotted a transfer, essentially all it did is swap that wallet address with the one controlled by the attacker and effectively diverting them funds on the fly. It did also, in the attack, exfiltrate tokens, environment variables, and API keys subtly to some remote servers. But the primary objective was the cryptocurrency fraud there. But why are these attacks still kind of succeeding? Well, the attack worked because it exploited both human trust and automation blind spots, I would say. Developers are trained to respond quickly to anything security related. The email's tone, the timing, and design actually matched NPM's legitimate communication. So it all felt like routine. And by adding the capture step, the attackers outsmarted a lot of the automated defenses, the same systems that many organizations rely to crawl them links. And then once a maintainer fell for it, that single compromised account became a trusted distribution point. So when you think about this, every downstream user who installed that updated package unwillingly pulled that tainted code into their own environment. And from a wider lens, it kind of reinforces why behavioral context really matters. On the surface, this was just another kind of reset your two-factor authentication message, but behaviorally it stood out. It was sent from an uncommon domain. It was actually sent at an unusual hour, and it was sent to a very specific subset of high-value recipients. And those subtle inconsistencies is what I feel defenders look for when separating a legitimate workflow notification from a highly targeted impersonation. And, if you really think about it, it's rarely the content that exposes this type of threat. It's the actual context that you use around that threat. So what was the result of this? The malicious packages were taken down within hours. So, from a response perspective, defenders did extremely well in this scenario, which limited the actual cryptocurrency losses. But, when you think about it for that short window, attackers had effectively poisoned the supply chain, spreading wallet stealing malware through trusted software updates. To me, it's a powerful reminder that even sophisticated compromises still start with something very simple. A single phishing email that looks completely normal on the surface. And once trust is broken at that level, every layer above it, whether it's packages, the builds, the users, they all then inherit that risk. And this case or case study ties together, two things we'll keep coming back to. The email was the first point of failure. and behavior as that signal can expose what looks routine but actually isn't. So let's jump into the final case study. So this second case study really shows how attackers are exploiting brand trust and urgency to drain cryptocurrency directly from victims. This time it was actually impersonating a hardware wallet provider or a well-known one. In this campaign, attackers impersonated Ledger. It is one of the most trusted names in hardware crypto wallets, interestingly, when I started researching this. But they sent out fake wallet maintenance emails, warning users that their device required a mandatory update to remain compatible with the latest blockchain networks. The emails, again, looked very legitimate. It contained Ledger logos. It had that professional tone. It had the web certificates and on the linked domains. But recipients who clicked were taken to a spoofed Ledger website that, again, was visually identical to the legitimate one. Everything matched, the color scheme, the layout, all of the links on the page were correct as well. And then once on that page, victims were prompted to enter their, I think it was up to 24 words, recovery phrase to synchronize their wallet after the update actually takes place. But if you haven't guessed it already, that phrase is effectively the wallet's private key. And by entering it, users handed over full control of their funds. Attackers imported these seeded phrases into their own wallets and drained their assets within minutes. From a technical standpoint, the clone sites used common front-end frameworks copied from Ledger's own resources, and they registered kind of domains like there was Ledger-support, Ledger-update, and the reason for using these domains is that they pass that quick visual check by users. The backend actually logged recovery phrases and transmitted them via telecom bots and disposable command and control servers. And that was really for speed and to remain anonymous as well. The attack worked because it combined authentic branding and that psychological urgency. You catch people in the right time, right place, they will absolutely fall for these types of attacks. Even experienced crypto holders conditioned to trust like Ledger branded messages, and especially ones that come across as security updates as well. And by framing it as time sensitive, like a time sensitive maintenance issue, the attackers bypassed skepticism and triggered immediate action. And it's another example of how phishing is no longer defined by things like spelling errors or generic content. These campaigns are polished. A lot of the time they're localized now. And because of AI, they are extremely data driven and they exploit behavior. So it's not just about technology anymore. And from a detection perspective, context is everything. A message claiming to be a firmware update might look normal in isolation, but behaviorally, it's unusual. It's sent from a new domain, and it's to a narrow audience of crypto wallet owners. And at the same time, when Ledger hadn't actually announced any kind of updates publicly as well. And those are the kind of anomalies, again, defenders would look at to distinguish a legitimate vendor message from a convincing impersonation, which happened in this case. And when you think about the outcome, it was devastating for some who entered their recovery phrases. Entire wallets were emptied in minutes, with transactions spreading across multiple blockchain networks to obscure that trail. But beyond the financial loss, the broader impact was the erosion of trust in crypto ecosystems. even when companies like Ledger weren't breached, users began questioning, every legitimate communication. And the attack reinforces a key theme that I feel we've seen from both case studies. Email remains the attacker's most efficient starting point. Even when the goal sits deep within the crypto world or elsewhere, it all starts with a very simple email. Whether it's a developer receiving a two-factor authentication reset, or it's a wallet owner, acting on a firmware alert, attackers rely on the same thing, the trust in the familiar. Recognizing when something looks normal but behaves abnormally is really what kind of breaks that chain. So far we've looked at how attackers exploit trust in two different contexts. First, by impersonating developer platforms to spread crypto stealing code, and then by mimicking trusted wallet providers to drain funds directly. Both attacks started the same way, with a believable email that looked normal, but behaved abnormally. So let's move into the world of cryptocurrency to something that looks probably a bit more familiar in the enterprise email space, but it absolutely follows the exact same playbook that we've seen. So let's just jump into the demo platform. This is an example of a common business email compromise, specifically invoice fraud, that was detected in one of our customer organizations. Here you can see the email has come from Prolier Systems, who is a known vendor of enterprise.com. But in this specific example, one of the mailboxes of Prolier has actually been compromised. And specifically, it's Lucia Foreman's account that has been compromised. And she's sending an email to Renee West, who is a VP in Treasury. Now, the threat actor has done something very clever here by piggybacking on the back of an existing conversation. And the attacker's essentially wanting to provide new banking information that will divert funds into their own account, and they're asking them if they can handle it at the earliest convenience. You can see here that there's actually no links, but there is one attachment. When we look at the attachment, it's actually just a standard PDF, which is supplying new banking information within here. So again, the theme is the same as our earlier use cases. The attacker doesn't need to breach enterprise.com. Email is that entry point. They impersonate or compromise a trusted source. And in this case, it's not NPM or Ledger, but it is a legitimate vendor. And the goal is financial gain, whether that's a crypto wallet or a corporate wire transfer in this example. So why is it traditional security solutions are struggling to detect these types of threats? Well, first off, it's coming from a known vendor in Prolier Systems. So when you think about the traditional sender authentication checks, it's going to pass SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. We can also see the email has no links, so you're not going to get any kind of threat intelligence hits. And we can saw before that it's got one attachment. And when we drill into this, if you apply any kind of sandboxing on this, you're not going to get any types of hits. And this is the same pattern that we saw earlier in the NPM example. A message that looks completely authentic, but acts abnormally once you examine the actual context. In both cases, static inspection can't help you here. You need to understand who usually sends what, from where, and actually with what intent. So how did Abnormal detect this? Well, first off, using identity analysis, we can see out of the 1,000 emails observed from Prolier, none have actually originated from the Netherlands. Also using behavioral analysis, we can see that there's a sensitive conversation with Prolier, but in the middle of this, the reply to address change was changed to this lookalike domain. And we know this is commonly associated with vendor takeover. We can easily see this as well as we move down into the email content, where we can see the reply to, which has been highlighted as part of this lookalike domain mid-conversation. Also using content analysis, where we apply natural language processing and language understanding, we can see that there's a financial request with urgent sentiment. And we can see some of this with our text analysis. So we can see payment information, which is actually that financial element. And we can see at the earliest convenience, which is flagged as kind of like, that time element as well. So each of these, anomalies on its own, could be benign, but together they paint a very different picture, and they paint a picture of a compromised vendor account. This is the same behavioral lens that we talked about earlier. In the NPM case, it was an email that didn't align with NPM's usual communication pattern. Here it's a vendor behaving in ways that break that normal rhythm of business communication. In both cases, the attacker weaponized trust. And whether that trust lives in open source ecosystems or in this example, vendor relationships as well. I do want to quickly jump across to vendor base, which I feel is really powerful. This is where shared federated behavioral intelligence really matters. If one organization sees Prolier systems being spoofed, impersonated, or even behaving kind of abnormally, that insight helps others recognize similar patterns faster. And that concept of building that federated understanding of what normal looks like across vendors is what helps us stay ahead of financially motivated attackers who move fast and hide inside them legitimate relationships. When you think about it, the method, may change. It might be one day a crypto drain, the next day an invoice diversion, the next, but the behavior behind it remains the absolute same. Attackers are exploiting trust to move money at speed, and recognizing them behavioral deviations early is definitely what stops both of them. So let's jump back into the slides and move on. As I mentioned, this is a pre-recorded session. So before we move into the live Q&A, I really wanted to plug our upcoming ThreatStream sessions. First off, we've got hidden entry points, how Microsoft 365 misconfigurations create vulnerabilities. That is in December next month, and that will be delivered by Avishek. And then we have Phishing 2.0, Duo passcodes under siege, and that's in January with Jesus. Each of them focus on different attack vectors, but all share the same goal, to expose blind spots that really abnormal can help protect against. So I hope this session helped you understand how cryptocurrency fraud campaigns are evolving, whether it's from supply chain compromises to brand impersonation scams, and why behavioral AI is essential for detecting them subtle signals that something's actually off. At this point, let's open it up for live Q&A. And if you are watching live, drop your questions in the Q&A panel, and we'll address as many as possible. But just on a personal note, because it's recorded, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And I'll see you on the next ThreatStream with that. And I will hand over to our Q&A hosts. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mike, for that session. Honestly, that was great. In the chat, you will see a link to the ThreatStream page. So yeah, if you'd like to sign up for our future sessions, go ahead and click on that link and you can sign up there. For Q&A, it looks like there are 3 questions here in the chat. So I'll just go through them here. The first question, when it comes to these crypto fraud attacks, are we seeing attacks using spoofed domains, or are these more often internal compromises? So yeah, unfortunately, we are seeing both attacks. When it comes to these crypto fraud attacks, we are seeing them from spoofed domains. We're seeing them from internal accounts that belong to your domain. But unfortunately, we're also seeing an increase in vendor compromised attacks. And this becomes an issue with security practitioners, right? When we onboard a vendor, we're often asked to add this vendor's domain to our safe list in our third-party secure email gateway. And these vendors, they've already established a relationship with the user. So when a malicious actor compromises a vendor's account, not only is it going to bypass those checks within the third-party secure email gateway, it's also going to be easier for them to deceive a user in your domain that they've already established a relationship with. So it's going to make detection really difficult if you only have traditional tools at your disposal. That's one of the benefits of Abnormal's defense in depth email security solution is that with our behavioral AI, we can see these abnormalities within those email communications and automate the remediation of those emails sent from compromised vendors. Second question. You mentioned behavioral baselines earlier in this presentation. How does Abnormal use behavioral baselines in these scenarios? This is something that happens pretty much right out the gate with our platform, with our integration. We're going to start learning and mapping user-to-user relationships. We're going to analyze linguistic patterns via our natural language processing. And we even look at the roles. So the roles and the titles that these individuals in your organization have. And with that information, we create a baseline of what normal good communications are. And if there are any abnormalities, again, that go against the baseline of what good communication is, that's when our platform then automatically remediates that new malicious behavior. So it's just a little bit different from what traditional tools are doing nowadays, right? So the traditional third-party secure email gateway, it's looking for known indications of compromise, right? So traditional tools, they're designed to stop known attacks. So with our API integration into Exchange Online, that's where we provide you guys with defense in depth. You're going to have those known IOCs being mitigated by either the third-party secure email gateway or by your native SEG 365 or Google Workspace. And then Normal is going to provide you guys with defense in depth, pretty much a new last line of defense at the mailbox layer. That's going to provide you those behavioral AI protections. Step 3. Question 3. What steps can non-abnormal customers take today to reduce exposure to crypto fraud? So yeah, this is going to be an issue. What do we do in those scenarios? So we did see Mike Morton just highlight an attack that was pretty much that had a CAPTCHA listed in it. We want to make sure that within our security awareness training solutions that we are training our users to know and see that, hey, just because this link is being protected by a CAPTCHA does not automatically make it legitimate. So we want to make sure that when CAPTCHAs are being involved, we can't really block CAPTCHAs as security practitioners, but we can train our users to let them know, hey, still be cautious, even if the link is being protected by a CAPTCHA. What else can we do as security practitioners? Well, we can talk with our purchasing team, right? We want to talk with our purchasing team and ensure that they are monitoring for unusual invoice or payment patterns. We also want to talk is crypto an accepted currency for our organization, right? Because if it's not, maybe we should have a policy in place with our purchasing team that states, hey, we don't accept crypto so that they don't fall for crypto fraud attacks. It's going to be really challenging to stop these kinds of attacks with just traditional tools, right? And I was there. I spent 17 years in the K-12 space prior to joining up with Abnormal, and while I was there, nobody really told IT who we're purchasing our fire detectors from, who we're purchasing refrigerators from, who do we purchase desks and chairs from. So as a security practitioner, how are we expected to secure the supply chain without knowing who is in the supply chain? Um, these are steps that non-abnormal customers can take. But yeah, hopefully eventually you will be able to integrate behavioral AI into your email security stack and gain that visibility into who your vendors are and what good communications from those vendors look like. And with that, that is the last question here. I'd like to thank everybody here for joining us today. And with that, we'll catch you guys next month. Thank you. Bye.